Chapter 1. The Unseen Battlefield. There is a war being fought right now, and most people don't even realize they're in it. No bullets. No blood. No flags. No marching armies. But the casualties are everywhere. Wasted potential. Forgotten dreams. Unwritten books. Unbuilt empires. And lives lived halfway, comfortable but aching. Breathing but never truly alive. The war is not out there. It's not in politics, not in economies, not in the external chaos of a spinning world. The war is internal, subtle, silent, fought in the space between your ears. This is the battlefield of thought, where the quality of your life is decided, not by circumstance, but by focus. Because wherever your focus goes, your energy flows. And where your energy flows, your life follows. Your thoughts are not passive. They are not mere commentary on life. They are architects. They are blueprints. They are commands to your nervous system, to your decisions, to your habits. And most people? They've surrendered their most powerful weapon before they've even learned how to use it. We live in a world that feeds on distraction. Endless screens, constant noise, curated outrage. They don't just steal your attention, they shape it. You become what you consume. Not metaphorically. Biologically. The neuroplasticity of your brain means that what you focus on carves grooves into your very being. Think enough fear, you become it. Focus on limitation, and it becomes your ceiling. Obsess over what could go wrong, and your actions will follow like a shadow, obedient and small. You were not built to live that way. Look back at the titans of history, not the ones born with crowns, but the ones who carved their names into time with nothing but obsession and belief. Thomas Edison, working for years in the dark before gifting the world light. Carnegie, born into a dirt floor shack, becoming the embodiment of steel and resolve. Lincoln, a self-taught farm boy who led a fractured nation through its darkest hour, not because he was destined, but because he decided. What did they all have in common? They controlled their focus. Not just when it was easy, not just when they were winning, but especially when they were alone, ridiculed, misunderstood. Especially when the world screamed, stop. They trained their minds like warriors. They aimed their thoughts like arrows. And through years of invisible work, they reprogrammed what the world told them was permanent. They didn't just think differently. They believed differently. And that belief shaped everything. Most people don't fail because they aim too high and miss. They fail because they aim too low and hit. They confuse safety with strategy. They call caution wisdom. They listen to the voice in their head that doesn't belong to them. You think every doubt you have is yours? You think that inner voice telling you, you're not ready, not smart enough, not meant for that life. You think that's you speaking? That voice is a recording, the loop, a script written by your environment, by your failures, by the comments you didn't realize you absorbed, by teachers who told you to play smaller, by family who thought they were protecting you, by a culture that profits from your insecurity. And every time you agree with that voice, every time you believe it, you're casting a vote for a future you don't want. But here's the shift. That voice is not the enemy. Your ignorance of it is. Because once you become aware of it, really aware, you can challenge it. You can grab it mid-thought and say, no, that's not mine. That doesn't serve me. That doesn't belong here anymore. And in that moment, you become something rare. Conscious. A conscious human is a dangerous thing. Because once you take control of your thoughts, you take control of your direction. And direction is destiny. Think about it. Every invention, every innovation, every breakthrough started with one person choosing to focus not on the way things are, but on the way things could be. Focus on possibility. Focus on vision. Focus on solutions while others stared at the problems. You're not stuck because life is hard. You're stuck because your focus is undisciplined. You're staring at the wall instead of the door. You're locked into loops of worry instead of blueprints for action. And the worst part? You've done it for so long it feels normal. Mediocrity has become familiar. Overthinking has become your ritual. You've mistaken activity for progress, scrolling for learning, and comfort for peace. But if you're still here, still listening, then something in you is ready to wake up. Not hype. Not temporary inspiration. Wake up to the reality that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who chooses them. You are the one who directs them. And from this moment on, your job is no longer to hope for a better life. Your job is to focus into it. That means every morning, you aim your mind like a weapon. You decide what you're building. You decide what matters. And you refuse, absolutely refuse, to water weeds with your attention. Let them grow somewhere else. Not in your mind. Not in your house. Not in your business. Not in your relationships. Your mind is sacred ground. And from now on, you protect it like your life depends on it, because it does. When you change your focus, you change your inputs. When you change your inputs, you change your beliefs. And when you change your beliefs, you change your behavior, effortlessly. That's why this isn't about grinding harder. This is about aiming better. Laser focus, not scattered intensity. Strategic obsession, not reckless energy. Devotion to your mission, not addiction to distraction. You want to build something? Build it first in the silence of thought. Hold it there with intensity, with clarity, with reverence. Because the future belongs to those who learn to think on purpose. So let this be your wake-up call. You are no longer just surviving your thoughts. You are leading them, directing them, building from them. And as your focus sharpens, everything will begin to shift. Not all at once. Not overnight. But inevitably. Because when you take control of your thoughts, you take control of your emotions. When you control your emotions, you influence your behavior. And when your behavior becomes consistent with your vision, your future becomes predictable, not because it's easy, but because it's engineered. No more chaos. No more mental clutter. No more waiting for clarity to show up like a guest at your door. You're done waiting. You're done reacting. You're done living by default. This is the moment you draw the line. You control what you allow in. You control what you amplify. You control the signal. Because where focus goes, power flows. And from now on, your power flows forward. Single. This is the beginning. This is control. This is the return of your mind. Chapter 2, Mindset, the silent engine of everything. The world will hand you tools. It will offer you opportunities. It may even throw luck your way. But none of it matters if the engine driving you, the mechanism through which you interpret, filter, and respond to life, is operating on the wrong settings. That engine is your mindset. It is the silent driver behind every outcome you've ever produced, every relationship you've maintained or lost, every goal you've crushed or abandoned, and every day you've either mastered or wasted. Mindset is not a motivational slogan. It is not a trendy concept for self-help blogs. It is the invisible software that determines what version of reality you're capable of interacting with. And for most people, that software hasn't been updated in years. You've been conditioned to see mindset as something passive, either you have a good one or a bad one, like it's a personality trait or a temperament. But mindset isn't passive. It's not permanent. It's programmable. And it's programmed every day by the thoughts you accept, the patterns you repeat, the boundaries you maintain, and the environment you allow yourself to live in. It's shaped by what you do when things go wrong. It's built by what you focus on when no one is watching. It's reinforced every time you choose long-term alignment over short-term comfort. There are people walking through life as if their mindset is an immovable structure, as if the way they view the world is a fact instead of a filter. They wake up and see limitation because their mind has been trained to find it. They meet every challenge with resistance, every setback with self-pity, every opportunity with suspicion. And because they believe the world is rigged against them, their mind seeks confirmation of that belief in every conversation, every disappointment, every piece of news. The mind is not biased toward truth, it's biased toward what it already believes. If it believes you are small, unworthy, doomed to repeat the past, it will organize reality to reflect that belief. That's why mindset must be challenged. Not once, but constantly. You can tell everything about a person's future by how they think under pressure. When life doesn't go their way, do they blame or do they build? When they fail, do they spiral or do they study? When they're rejected, do they retreat or do they reframe? These are not character traits, they are mindset patterns. And if those patterns are not brought into the light and reconstructed, they become invisible prisons. Prisons that feel like reality, but are really just habits of perception. If you want to master your thoughts, if you want to control the trajectory of your life with deliberate intention, you must start by becoming violently honest about your mindset. Where do you automatically default to excuses? Where do you fold under discomfort? Where do you romanticize struggle instead of rising to meet it? These are hard questions, and the world will never force you to ask them. But if you want to evolve, they are not optional. A growth-oriented mindset is not just about thinking positively. That's cosmetic. That's surface level. This isn't about putting a smile over a wound and calling it healing. A true growth mindset is forged through friction. It is the result of sitting with your discomfort long enough to extract the lesson, of approaching failure as information instead of identity, of seeing the gap between who you are and who you want to become, and refusing to fill it with excuses. A strong mindset doesn't ignore pain, it moves through it with clarity. People will often say, "I just need to change my life," but they don't realize that nothing external will last until the internal framework shifts. You can change your environment, your job, your routine, your friends, but if your mindset remains reactive, fear-based, small, or rigid, you will rebuild the same patterns in a different location. You don't need more change. You need integration. You need to update the way your mind relates to challenge, discomfort, failure, pressure, and possibility. This is the work that high performers do that most people never see. They spend hours not just training their bodies or building their businesses, but training their minds. Because they understand that the mind is the origin of all performance. It's the core infrastructure. They treat their mindset like an athlete treats their recovery, non-negotiable, essential, sacred. Because when pressure comes, your body will follow your breath will follow your thoughts, and your thoughts will follow the story you've rehearsed 1,000 times in your mind. What story are you rehearsing? That you're tired? That you're overwhelmed? That you're not built for this? That success is for other people? Because if that's the script you're running, it doesn't matter what your goals are, your mind will sabotage them before you even begin. You don't need to force yourself to take massive action. You need to remove the mental blocks that are suppressing the action that would already come naturally. This is why environment matters. Not just physical environment, but the mental one you cultivate. Who are you listening to? What content are you consuming? What kind of conversations are you having daily? Every one of those things is either strengthening or weakening your mindset. You become what surrounds you. If you're surrounded by fear, scarcity, gossip, victimhood, your mindset will absorb it like smoke into fabric. If you're surrounded by clarity, ownership, vision, strategy, your mindset will start to stretch into new patterns of expansion. That's not about being around successful people or forcing positivity, it's about being around truth, being around discipline, being around people and environments that reflect the next level of you, not the version you're trying to outgrow. Your mindset must be fed. It must be trained. And like the body, if you don't train it, it will default to weakness. But here's the truth that changes everything. Mindset doesn't have to be fixed. It doesn't have to be mysterious. It doesn't have to be something you inherit from your past or protect like an identity badge. It can be rebuilt. Right now. From this moment on. Not by wishing, not by hoping, but by choosing to reframe everything you experience through the lens of ownership. That's the turning point. The day you stop seeing life as something that happens to you, and begin to recognize that life is shaped through you, through your thoughts, your focus, your emotional discipline, your willingness to take responsibility for your own energy and story. That is the root of mental control. It doesn't start with results. It starts with mindset. Because once your mindset becomes non-negotiable, once your standards for how you think, what you believe, and what you tolerate rise to match your goals, your entire life recalibrates. You start making decisions faster. You stop wasting time on people who drain you. You stop chasing things that don't align with your values. You stop breaking promises to yourself. The difference between people who live on fire and people who live on autopilot isn't talent. It isn't luck. It's the mindset they wake up with every morning. One believes that they are at the mercy of their circumstances. The other believes they are the creators of them. That one belief, practiced, integrated, and relentlessly executed, is the difference between a life of reaction and a life of direction. Chapter 3. Belief. The laws that govern your reality. Belief is not decoration. It is not philosophy. It is not some optional mindset accessory you put on when you feel inspired. Belief is the operating system of your life. It is the set of invisible laws you've accepted, often without question, that dictate the limits of your behavior, the shape of your future, and the ceiling on your potential. Most people live their entire lives obeying beliefs they never chose, beliefs passed down from family, burned into them by early failures, reinforced by mediocre environments, and masked by rationalizations that feel like logic but are really just fear with better branding. If your beliefs tell you that success is for other people, that greatness requires permission, that ambition is dangerous, that you're too old, too young, too late, too flawed, then no amount of effort will free you. Because your actions are slaves to your beliefs. They orbit them like satellites. They are confined by what your internal world has declared as possible. And unless you have the courage to challenge that declaration, to rewrite the rules of what's realistic, your life will stay trapped in patterns that feel justified, but are really just self-imposed exile. Here's the brutal truth. The mind will never allow you to consistently act in contradiction to what it fundamentally believes to be true. You may override it temporarily with motivation or sheer willpower, but eventually, the system will snap back into alignment. This is why people sabotage their own progress. Not because they're lazy or incapable, but because they are trying to live a life that their beliefs have not been updated to support. If you believe you're unworthy of wealth, you'll spend it, avoid it, reject opportunities to earn it, or unconsciously create crises that keep you broke. If you believe you're not built for love, you'll sabotage relationships or attract partners who validate that belief. If you believe you'll always be stuck, your actions will mirror that belief, even if your words say otherwise. This is not a character flaw. This is programming. And like all programming, it can be rewritten, if you have the courage to stop defending it. Because here's the trap. We defend our beliefs, even when they're killing us. We argue for our limitations because they feel familiar. They give us a story to hold on to, something that justifies the life we've settled for. It's safer to say, I can't, than to risk finding out what might happen if you went all in. It's easier to blame the economy, your childhood, your genetics, or your circumstances than to face the terrifying freedom of owning your power to create something new. But belief is not built in theory. It is built in evidence. Your brain doesn't care what you want, it cares what you prove. You prove things to your mind not by shouting affirmations into the mirror, but by consistent action that contradicts the old narrative. You build the belief that you are disciplined by showing up every day when you don't feel like it. You build the belief that you are a leader by making hard decisions and owning the consequences. You build the belief that you can change by changing, slowly, imperfectly, relentlessly, until your nervous system begins to recognize a new pattern. That's when belief becomes embodied. When it stops being a concept and starts being your default operating mode. That's when confidence shifts from something you try to project into something that radiates without effort. Because belief is not about hype. It's about alignment. When your actions and your beliefs are aligned, you feel unstoppable, not because you've removed all fear, but because you've finally stopped lying to yourself. And yes, this work is difficult. It requires you to dig, to ask questions you've avoided for years. Where did this belief come from? Who told me I wasn't good enough? When did I start believing that I needed to shrink to be accepted? These are not surface-level reflections. They're confrontations. But they are necessary. Because unexamined beliefs don't just live in your mind. They shape your world. And until you bring them into the light, they will continue to script your story from the shadows. Consider how many people never pursue their potential simply because they inherited someone else's limitations. A parent who was too afraid to try. A teacher who saw them through the lens of statistics. A friend who couldn't imagine something better. And without realizing it, they absorbed those limitations like secondhand smoke. That's how most belief systems are built, not from truth, but from proximity. From repetition. From emotional experiences that planted seeds of fear and watered them with shame. But belief can also be rebuilt the same way, through new proximity, new repetition, new emotional experiences tied to growth instead of regression. This is why environment is critical. Who you spend time with, what you expose yourself to, the standards you surround yourself with, these things are either reinforcing your old beliefs or creating new ones. You don't need people who coddle your comfort zone. You need people who remind you what's possible. Who don't flinch when you speak your vision. Who expect more from you, not because you're lacking, but because they see what you're capable of becoming. Belief is contagious. And once you realize that, you stop leaving it to chance. You become deliberate with your inputs. You curate your environment like your future depends on it, because it does. You filter out anything that strengthens the old script. You seek out people, content, and experiences that reinforce the new one. And over time, that belief becomes so strong, so deep, that it becomes your new baseline. You don't try to believe anymore. You are belief in motion. That's the moment when your thoughts shift from possibility to inevitability. When you no longer ask, "Can I do this?" but instead ask, "How soon?" That's when life begins to bend, not because you've figured out all the steps, but because your internal system now expects alignment with the new standard. That expectation creates action. That action creates momentum. That momentum becomes evidence. And that evidence becomes identity. This is not theory. This is not hype. This is physics. Focus creates thought. Thought shapes belief. Belief determines behavior. Behavior compounds into results. Results feed back into belief. The system is always running. The only question is, who's programming it? You are not your past beliefs. You are not your conditioning. You are not your failures. You are not the labels others gave you. You are whatever you have the courage to believe, deeply, relentlessly, obsessively, until the world has no choice but to adjust. Because when belief becomes your default state, when your internal code reflects who you choose to be instead of who you were told to be, your life no longer happens to you. It happens through you. Because you have finally claimed the one thing most people never do: ownership of what you believe. And with that, the rules of your reality begin to change. Not eventually, not someday, but now. Chapter 4: Clarity, the Precision of Power. Clarity is not something you stumble into. It's not a random epiphany gifted by the universe. It is something you build. With intention. With discipline. With a relentless refusal to accept vagueness where certainty is required. Most people live their lives in a fog, reacting to what shows up instead of designing what they actually want. They spend years chasing goals that aren't even their own, borrowed dreams, inherited expectations, surface-level desires that sound impressive but carry no emotional weight. And then they wonder why they're exhausted, burned out, directionless. It's not because they're broken. It's because they never stopped long enough to define what actually matters to them. Clarity isn't a luxury. It's a prerequisite for any kind of lasting transformation. Without clarity, focus becomes impossible. And without focus, your energy becomes scattered, diluted across too many directions, none of which lead to anything meaningful. You end up busy but ineffective, exhausted but unrewarded. Your calendar fills, your to-do list grows, your days blur, but you make no real progress. Because action without clarity is just motion. And motion alone does not build a life. Direction does. To control your thoughts, you must first know what they're supposed to be building. The mind is like a GPS. It only becomes useful when you plug in a destination. Without that, it will wander. It will loop. It will default to what's familiar, not what's forward. It will prioritize what's urgent over what's important. And you will wake up weeks, months, years later wondering where all your time went. So stop. Strip it all down. Forget the noise. Forget what you think you're supposed to want. Ask yourself, what do I actually value? Not in theory. In practice. What would I choose if I knew no one would judge me? If fear wasn't whispering in my ear? If I wasn't trying to impress, avoid, or justify? What do I want to wake up for? Fight for? Build when no one's watching? These are not rhetorical questions. These are the foundation of clarity. Because until you define your values, your goals will always feel hollow. They'll be guesses. They'll be reactive responses to other people's standards. But once you know your core values, your actual priorities, not the ones you recite to sound good, then everything else begins to align. Decision-making becomes simpler. You stop hesitating, overthinking, second-guessing. Because you finally have a filter. Does this serve what I truly care about, or is it just noise disguised as opportunity? And clarity doesn't stop with values. It must extend to your vision. What do you want your life to look like in 5 years? Not the vague fantasy, but the actual design. What time do you wake up? Who do you spend your day with? What kind of work are you doing? What are you known for? What problems are you solving? What does your health feel like? What kind of boundaries do you keep? What kind of mental state is normal for you? If you can't see it, you can't build it. The brain needs specificity. Without it, it will fight for the status quo. It will defend what is, not what could be. Because clarity feels like safety. Ambiguity feels like threat. That's how we're wired. So if you don't consciously define your future, your unconscious mind will just repeat the past. Not because you're weak, but because it's programmed to seek familiarity. Clarity breaks that cycle. It gives the mind something new to work toward instead of something old to protect. But clarity isn't just about seeing the goal. It's about seeing the cost, the price of inaction, the cost of distraction, the impact of delay. When you're truly clear, you can no longer afford to drift. You can no longer tolerate the energy vampires, the mental clutter, the low-leverage tasks that keep you spinning but never scaling. Clarity forces a confrontation between who you are now and who you need to become. And that confrontation is what wakes you up. Think of it this way. A laser is just light that's been focused. Focused light becomes powerful enough to cut through steel. But scattered light? It just glows. Most people are glowing, visible, maybe even impressive, but not cutting through anything. Not building anything with force. Because they lack clarity. They're trying to do too much for too many reasons that don't actually matter. And as a result, their progress is diluted. Their identity is inconsistent. Their confidence erodes slowly, day by day, under the weight of confusion. But when you become clear, truly clear, everything sharpens. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't matter. You stop negotiating with your own weakness. You stop chasing things just because they're available. You develop what few ever will, a reason. A singular, focused, emotionally compelling reason that drives you to act even when you're tired, even when you're scared, even when everything in your life is telling you to slow down. That's the power of clarity. It creates urgency without chaos. It creates intensity without burnout. Because now, you're not just moving, you're building. Every rep, every meeting, every rejection, every win, every setback, they all feed the same system. A system designed by you, for a purpose you actually believe in. And that's where your thoughts begin to transform, not because you force them to change, but because they now serve something clear. Something real. You don't have to keep redirecting them. They know where to go. You don't have to silence your doubt. Doubt becomes irrelevant in the face of direction. You don't have to fight to stay motivated. Motivation becomes unnecessary when clarity becomes a habit. So if you're feeling lost, stuck, overwhelmed, not because you lack potential, but because you lack precision, start here. Strip away the noise. Reject the vague. Destroy the unnecessary. And define, without apology, what this next season of your life must look like. Not what you'll settle for. What you're committed to. Because once that's clear, the thoughts will follow. The behaviors will align. The identity will emerge. And the power you've been chasing will stop hiding in the future. It will become available now. Through. Because you finally gave your mind something to build with. A reason that matters. And in the presence of that kind of clarity, doubt has no voice. It simply fades. Chapter 5. Vision, the blueprint of becoming. You cannot build a life of meaning if you can't first imagine it with precision. Vision is not a buzzword. It's not an abstract dream you keep in the background of your mind for comfort. It's not just some 5-year plan written on a whiteboard. Vision is the blueprint of your becoming. It's the architecture of your future, mapped out before the world believes it, before the results arrive, before the evidence supports it. It's what separates the people who drift through life responding to circumstances from those who shape life according to their design. And this isn't about fantasy. This isn't about daydreaming or wishful thinking. This is about training your brain to build in the direction of a specific outcome. The human mind is goal-oriented by nature. It's always aiming at something, whether you realize it or not. If you don't consciously create a vision, your mind will default to survival, to safety, to comfort, to maintaining the status quo. That means without a vision, your thoughts don't work for your future, they work against it. They reinforce what is instead of what could be. Vision gives your life a target. It turns abstract desires into concrete direction. When you know where you're going, uncertainty becomes data, not paralysis. Obstacles become part of the route, not reasons to stop. Discomfort becomes the gym where strength is built. But without vision, everything becomes overwhelming. You respond emotionally instead of strategically. You confuse noise for signal. And slowly, life becomes reaction instead of creation. The reason most people don't commit to a vision isn't because they don't want more. It's because they've been trained to believe they don't have the right to imagine more. They've internalized the expectations of a mediocre world. A world that tells you to keep your head down, be realistic, stop dreaming so big. A world that mistakes ambition for arrogance, clarity for stubbornness, boldness for irresponsibility. But every extraordinary thing ever built, every company, every movement, every innovation, every personal transformation, started with a vision that looked irrational to everyone else. Think about Walt Disney. Before he built a single park, he walked through an empty field and saw something that didn't exist yet. When others saw dirt, he saw castles. When others warned him it was too expensive, too ambitious, too risky, he focused on what only he could see. That wasn't delusion. That was vision. That was the discipline of imagination applied with intent. And he was right. Because now generations walk through places that were once only in his mind. You have the same power. Not to replicate Disney's path, but to define your own. To see what doesn't exist yet and build it anyway. To hold a vision with such intensity that your thoughts begin to orbit it, your energy begins to serve it, and your behavior begins to match it. That kind of vision becomes magnetic. It pulls you through resistance. It silences doubt, not by removing it, but by making it irrelevant. But here's where most people fail. They think having a vision is enough. It's not. The vision must be clear. It must be vivid. It must be detailed enough that you could describe it in a courtroom and paint it like a movie scene. Because the mind does not build what it cannot see. You must visualize not just the end goal, but the process. Not just the highlight reel, but the daily grind. The work. The moments of isolation. The discipline it will take to carry the vision through when the world stops clapping and the motivation fades. And don't confuse temporary goals with real vision. Goals are important, but they are outcomes. Vision is identity. Goals are things you check off. Vision is the context for your life. It's what you're here to build, who you're here to become, what your time on this planet is meant to represent. Vision creates meaning. Without it, you chase achievements that feel empty. You arrive at milestones and feel nothing because they were never tied to something deeper. Vision gives your suffering purpose. It turns pain into progress. When you're in the middle of the fight and the doubt creeps in, when the voice in your head starts asking why you're doing this, you don't answer with logic. You answer with vision. That's what keeps you standing. That's what gives weight to every early morning, every late night, every choice to go forward when comfort would be easier. Vision is the backbone of endurance. And here's the paradox. Your vision must be personal, but it cannot be selfish. The most powerful visions are bigger than you. They serve something outside of yourself. A family, a generation, a mission, a cause, a standard. That's what gives it resilience. When it's only about you, it's easy to quit. But when it's about something larger, something sacred, you don't just keep going. You evolve. You rise. You transform yourself to match the weight of the vision you're carrying. You don't wait to feel ready. You start becoming the kind of person who is worthy of the vision you've chosen. You stop playing small to keep others comfortable. You stop asking for permission to be exceptional. You stop editing your goals to fit someone else's idea of what's realistic. Because this is your vision, and your thoughts now serve it. Every day, relentlessly, you build routines that align with it. You eliminate distractions that pull you from it. You speak it aloud until your nervous system believes it. You write it down until it becomes muscle memory. Because the mind doesn't know the difference between reality and imagination. It knows repetition. So you feed it the future, over and over, until it can no longer tolerate thoughts that contradict it. This is how the mind becomes a weapon instead of a burden. Not through raw force, but through direction. A weapon must be aimed. And vision is the aim. So if your mind is wandering, distracted, scattered, stop. Not forever. Just long enough to define your next chapter. Not just what you want, but why you want it. Not just what's exciting, but what's worth enduring for. And once you see it, name it. Own it. Speak it with certainty before the world believes it. That's your job. Because no one else can do it for you. And no one else has to. Your vision is your responsibility. And once you decide to honor it fully, everything else starts to align. Your thoughts, your habits, your relationships, your energy, your life. That's the power of clarity combined with vision. It takes a scattered mind and gives it a mission. And that's when everything begins to move. Not because the world got easier, but because you got focused. Chapter 6, Purpose, the fire that doesn't go out. There is a difference between movement and meaning. You can be in motion, checking boxes, hitting deadlines, showing up, executing, and still feel empty. Still feel restless. Still feel like something essential is missing. That something is not more success, more attention, or more accolades. What's missing is purpose. Not the vague idea of purpose that gets tossed around in conversations and self-help books, but the real thing. The internal compass that aligns everything. Purpose is not about what you do, it's about why you do it. And until you connect to that why on a soul-deep level, no amount of progress will feel like enough. Purpose is the thing that makes struggle make sense. It's what transforms discipline from obligation into devotion. It's the fuel that keeps you moving when motivation dies and no one is clapping. Without it, effort feels like suffering. With it, effort becomes sacred. It's the reason some people burn out doing far less, while others endure years of hardship and emerge stronger. Purpose is the difference. Purpose doesn't eliminate pain, but it elevates it. It gives it weight, dignity, direction. Pain without purpose drains you. Pain with purpose builds you. But the mistake most people make is waiting for purpose to appear like some divine message. They sit still, hoping one day they'll wake up and just know what they were meant to do. But that's not how it works. Purpose isn't found. It's built. It's clarified over time. It's extracted from experience. From paying attention to your life. From noticing what angers you, what lights you up, what you would do even if you weren't paid. Purpose is hidden in your wounds. In your curiosities. In your patterns. In the pain you've endured and refused to let define you. Purpose lives where you've struggled and decided that struggle should mean something. It's not about passion. Passion fades. Passion is emotional. Purpose is structural. It anchors you. It holds you steady when your passion is nowhere to be found. You don't have to love the process every day when you're fueled by purpose, because it's no longer about how you feel, it's about what you've committed to become. Ask yourself, what do you want your suffering to stand for? What is the story you're writing with your life? Not the one you tell others, but the one your habits tell silently every single day. If someone followed you around and documented your effort, your conversations, your choices, what would they say your purpose was? That's the real answer. Purpose isn't a mission statement. It's not on your wall. It's in your behavior. It's in the alignment between your values and your daily actions. The truth is, most people don't lack drive. They lack alignment. They're chasing goals that aren't rooted in anything deeper than the surface. That's why they get tired so easily. That's why they need constant external motivation. Because they haven't made the internal decision to commit to something that matters more than their mood. But when you truly connect to purpose, everything changes. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" and start asking, Is this part of the mission? You stop retreating at the first sign of resistance. You stop questioning whether it's worth it, because your why makes the how irrelevant. Purpose is what allows you to delay gratification without resentment. It's what gives you patience in the process. It turns long hours into legacy. And legacy isn't about fame or recognition, it's about impact. It's about knowing that the way you live matters. That how you show up, how you respond, what you build, how you treat people, and what you leave behind is not random. That it all points back to something bigger. But you have to decide what that bigger thing is. And here's the hard truth. It can't be about you alone. The purpose that sustains is the one that serves. The one that lifts others. The one that creates value. The one that makes you impossible to ignore, not because you're loud, but because you're useful. When your purpose moves beyond self-interest and becomes service, service to an idea, a mission, a cause, a generation, you stop waiting to be inspired. You become inspiration. Think of the people who changed the world. Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr., Viktor Frankl. Their purpose came through pain, but they turned that pain into service. They didn't wait for perfect timing. They didn't need everyone to understand. They carried their purpose like fire in their bones, and they let it guide their steps even when the road made no sense. That kind of purpose can't be faked. It can't be downloaded. It has to be lived, refined, tested. And once you know what yours is, even a glimpse of it, you have a responsibility to protect it. From distractions. From doubt. From people who don't see what you see. Purpose is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes it looks like saying no to things that seem exciting because they don't fit the assignment. That's the price. But the reward is that you start living with integrity, the kind that comes from being fully aligned. Fully alive. And when your thoughts are anchored in purpose, they become clear. They stop racing. They stop panicking. They stop looking for validation. Because they know where they're going. That internal alignment brings a kind of peace that hustle never could. You stop living in reaction and start living from conviction. So no, this isn't about discovering some grand cosmic calling in a single moment. It's about listening, paying attention, following the breadcrumbs, doing the work that matters until meaning emerges. Purpose is not lightning. It's a fire you tend to daily, by choosing courage, by choosing service, by choosing to become more than what the world expected of you. You were not built to live a life of aimless activity. You were not designed to wake up and perform someone else's script. There's something in you that's supposed to be built. Something that only you can carry. Something that doesn't make sense to everyone, and doesn't have to. Find it. Honor it. Protect it. Because without purpose, effort is empty. But with it, every step becomes sacred. Chapter 7. Discipline, the bridge between potential and reality. Discipline is not punishment. It's not restriction. It's not a joyless grind that strips the color out of your life. That's the lie weak minds tell themselves to justify their inconsistency. Real discipline is freedom. It's structure in service of something higher. It's the act of showing up to your own life, not just when it's convenient or when inspiration strikes, but every single day, because you've decided that your future is worth it. Without discipline, nothing you think, believe, or hope for ever becomes real. It all stays potential. And potential, without execution, eventually becomes regret. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your systems. And discipline is the system that holds everything together when motivation disappears, which it always does. Motivation is fleeting, emotional, unreliable. It gets high on inspiration but runs when resistance shows up. Discipline doesn't flinch. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. Discipline doesn't care if you're tired, if you're scared, if you're bored. It only cares about the standard you've committed to. And that standard must come from within, not from external pressure or public accountability. True discipline is private. It's what you do when no one will ever know. People often ask how to build self-confidence, but they're looking in the wrong place. Confidence doesn't come from achievement. It comes from consistency. From doing the hard thing when it's hard. From keeping promises to yourself when it would be easier to slip. Every time you honor your word to yourself, even in the smallest way, You prove to your own mind that you're trustworthy. And when your mind believes you, your belief in yourself becomes unshakable. Discipline, then, is the vehicle that carries identity. Without it, identity is fragile. It crumbles under pressure. It collapses the moment comfort becomes available. But when discipline is practiced daily, your identity becomes durable. You don't need to rely on willpower anymore because your actions are no longer dictated by emotion. They're governed by decision, by design, by clarity of purpose. This is the internal shift few people ever make. They wait to feel right before they act, not realizing that action is what creates the feeling. They sit around hoping for inspiration, energy, or clarity, when in fact, discipline produces all of those things. Movement creates clarity. Repetition builds energy. Execution breeds confidence. But that only happens when you stop worshiping your feelings and start obeying your decisions. Let's be real. Most of the things that would change your life aren't even that complicated. They're just hard to do consistently. Wake up early. Move your body. Eat real food. Protect your time. Eliminate distractions. Do the deep work. Say no more often. Hold your boundaries. Follow through. These are not mysteries. They're practices. But the reason most people don't do them isn't because they don't know what to do. It's because they've made the mistake of thinking discipline is only for people who are already strong. That's backwards. Discipline is not the result of strength. It's the cause of it. Think of every person you admire. The authors, the athletes, the entrepreneurs, the leaders, the creators. Look beneath the surface of their results and you'll find the same thing. A boring, consistent, non-negotiable practice. Daily reps, a schedule, the process, a system. Discipline doesn't look sexy from the outside. It's quiet. It's often lonely. But it's where power is built. It's where skill is sharpened. It's where momentum is born. And if you want to talk about mental control, this is where the conversation becomes real. Because if your mind only knows how to obey how you feel, you are not in control. You're on a leash. A prisoner of mood, circumstance, fatigue, distraction. Control comes when your mind begins to follow your standards, not your cravings. When your habits are guided by what you've decided, not by what feels easy. Discipline is a choice you make once and reinforce every day after. It's not something you negotiate with. If you negotiate with discipline, you've already lost. It has to become a part of your identity, something that's not optional. Not because you're obsessed with punishment or perfection, but because you understand the cost of inconsistency. The cost of losing momentum. The cost of being the person who only shows up when life feels ideal. And yes, this means sacrifice. Discipline costs you comfort. It costs you convenience. It costs you the approval of people who don't get it. But it gives you something far greater, self-respect. The kind that can't be taken away because it wasn't given to you, it was earned, one decision at a time. Discipline also brings order to chaos. When the world feels unpredictable, your routines become a lifeline. When stress threatens to consume you, your habits become your anchor. When doubt creeps in, your consistency becomes your argument against it. You can look back and say, I may not know everything, but I know I don't quit. I know I've built this before. I know I've carried myself through storms. That's what discipline gives you, a body of proof. Evidence that you are not at the mercy of the world. That you've trained your mind, trained your body, trained your will to respond with alignment rather than impulse. But don't confuse discipline with rigidity. It's not about becoming robotic. It's about being in command. Command over your time, your energy, your attention. It's about building a system that serves your purpose, rather than being a slave to emotion or distraction. True discipline is adaptable. It flexes when it needs to, but it never breaks. And if you stay with it long enough, something powerful happens. The hard things become normal. The resistance fades. The identity changes. And one day, you look in the mirror and you don't see someone trying to be disciplined anymore. You see someone who is. That's when everything accelerates, not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. That's the bridge. The one that takes you from potential to reality. Discipline. Every day. Every moment. Every choice. Not because it's easy, because it's worth it. Chapter 8, Action, the Language of the Committed. There's a point where enough thinking becomes avoidance, where more planning becomes procrastination, where refining the idea is no longer strategy, it's fear in disguise. And the only way to move beyond that point is to act. Not perfectly, not with full certainty, but decisively. Because at some stage, the only thing left between you and the life you say you want is movement. And if you don't move, the moment passes. The opportunity closes. And the version of you who was ready begins to fade. Action is the final filter between dreamers and builders. Everyone has dreams. Everyone has goals. Everyone has some version of a better life they fantasize about. But few are willing to do what it takes when the fantasy dissolves and the work begins. Because action demands proof. It confronts all your internal narratives in real time. When you start moving, you learn quickly whether your belief is real or just intellectual. You find out if you're really willing to be seen struggling, if you're truly ready to endure discomfort, or if the idea was only ever attractive in theory. And that's why most people stay stuck in potential. Not because they don't want more, but because they fear what action will reveal. You can't fail in your head. You can't be rejected by a goal you never pursued. You can't be criticized for an idea you never shared. So instead of acting, people protect themselves by staying not ready. But readiness is a myth. You are never fully ready. You are always somewhat uncertain. The difference between those who move and those who stall is that one understands this truth and steps forward anyway. Every powerful life is built on action, bold, uncomfortable, courageous action. And it's not about scale. It's about consistency. It's not the grand, dramatic gestures that build momentum. It's the daily decisions. The call you make when you don't feel like selling. The workout you complete when no one's watching. The message you send even though your hands are shaking. The journal entry. The calendar block. The 10 minutes of deep work when your mind wants to wander. That's what real action looks like. Not glamorous, but transformative. And when you choose to act, you change your internal chemistry. You override the fear-based loop that has kept your mind in analysis. You prove to your brain that movement is safe, that stepping forward doesn't destroy you, that you are someone who does what they say they'll do. That sense of agency, of following through, is one of the most powerful psychological shifts a person can experience. It's how confidence is built from the ground up. There's something else about action that's rarely talked about. It gives you feedback. Until you act, everything is a theory. You can guess. You can assume. You can imagine 100 different outcomes. But the moment you take a real step, you get information, clear, unfiltered, honest feedback that thinking alone could never provide. You find out what works, what doesn't, what needs adjustment. You don't get clarity before the action, you get it through the action. Thomas Edison didn't figure out the light bulb on paper. He failed his way into it through over 1,000 attempts. Steve Jobs didn't revolutionize personal computing by theorizing alone. He built, he failed, he refined, he iterated. Even the great minds of ancient philosophy, Aristotle, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, wrote not to impress, but to live better. Their ideas were born from the battlefield of real life, not the safety of abstraction. Ideas must become behavior to become wisdom. Action also creates visibility. Not just externally, but internally. When you act, people start to see you differently, yes. But more importantly, you start to see yourself differently. You stop identifying as the dreamer and start embodying the doer. That shift in identity is subtle at first, but it snowballs. You wake up with more urgency. You stop doubting every decision. You stop needing permission. You stop asking if you're qualified, because now you've got evidence. You're in the game. And here's what most never understand. Momentum does not come from results. Momentum comes from consistency. If you wait to feel successful before you act, you'll never move. But if you act long enough, results become inevitable. You start stacking wins, and those wins become identity. This is where people begin to separate, where those who expect results too quickly quit, and those who understand the game stay the course. Because action teaches you patience. It teaches you process. It removes the obsession with outcome and replaces it with obsession for execution. It's also where your mind begins to recalibrate. At first, your thoughts resist action. They warn you. They caution. They pull you toward the comfortable. But the more you move, the more your mind learns that discomfort is not danger, that risk is not death, that failure is not final. Your nervous system begins to adjust to the new normal. And suddenly, what once felt overwhelming becomes baseline. But none of that happens until you start. Not when you have more time. Not when you feel ready. Not when you're done learning. While it's imperfect. While your heart is racing. While the doubt is still loud. Because every time you act in spite of fear, you train your mind to respect your will more than your worry. You'll never think your way into transformation. You'll act your way into it. Step by step. Repetition by repetition. Proof by proof. And the beautiful part? You don't need to see the whole staircase. Just the next step. Just the thing right in front of you. Do that. Then do the next. Over time, those steps become a path. That path becomes a road. That road becomes your life. And one day, you'll look back and realize, you didn't just move through the fear. You rewrote yourself through action. Because action is the only language the universe understands. The only signal the world responds to. The only real commitment you can make. Everything else is noise. Everything else is intention. Action is truth. And the world moves for those who speak it fluently. Chapter 9. Gratitude, the power of presence in a world obsessed with more. It's easy to chase. In fact, we're trained to. From the moment we become aware of the world around us, we're taught to seek the next thing. Higher achievement, better results, more recognition, bigger goals. And ambition has its place. Vision matters. But when forward motion becomes your only metric for progress, you lose the ability to recognize how far you've already come. You become blind to the value of your current moment. You start to measure life purely by what's missing, rather than honoring what already exists. That's where burnout begins. Not in the doing, but in the unending needing. Gratitude is not weakness. It is not the soft side of mindset reserved for sentimental moments or social media quotes. Gratitude is clarity. It is a weapon against the mental war of insufficiency. It allows you to reframe your reality, to center your focus not on what's lacking, but on what's already here, what you've endured, what you've built, what you've become. Gratitude is not about lowering your standards or pretending things are perfect. It's about recognizing that progress and presence are not enemies. You can still strive, still reach, still demand more of yourself, and do it from a place of fullness rather than scarcity. Most people walk around with a background program running in their mind that whispers, "It's not enough." No matter what they accomplish, the goalpost moves. They hit the milestone and within hours, they're already stressing over the next one. That's the nature of unchecked ambition. It becomes a thief. It robs you of joy. It convinces you that peace is only possible after you achieve just a little more. But peace is not a finish line. It's a state of awareness. And it's only available to those who train their mind to see what's already right before chasing what's next. Gratitude sharpens your perception. It reveals how many things are going right even when everything feels like it's falling apart. It anchors you in the storm. It reminds you that strength isn't just built in the struggle, it's revealed in your ability to see beauty in the process. And when you lead your mind with gratitude, something powerful happens. Fear shrinks, urgency becomes peace, and action becomes rooted not in desperation, but in alignment. Because when you're grateful, you stop moving from lack. You start moving from purpose. You stop trying to fill a void and start trying to honor a gift. You realize that your body, your breath, your ability to choose, to think, to change, to pursue, that is a gift. And to take that for granted is to disrespect the very opportunity you're praying for. This doesn't mean you become passive. Gratitude doesn't remove hunger, it refines it. It strips away the noise and reveals the right pursuits. It protects you from chasing validation instead of vision. It quiets the ego long enough for the soul to speak. And that voice, the voice of the soul, always speaks in presence. You don't hear it when you're constantly scanning the horizon for the next hit of success. You hear it in the stillness, in the breath between efforts, in the quiet awareness that you are already living someone else's answered prayer. Think about that for a moment. There are people who would give anything to be where you are now. To have what you take for granted. The health you're neglecting. The time you waste. The people you overlook. The opportunities you hesitate on. Gratitude is the lens that reveals that truth. It doesn't shame you, it wakes you up. It makes you aware of the abundance you're standing in, even when it doesn't look the way you expected. And this awareness does more than ground you. It strengthens you. Because when things get hard, and they will, gratitude becomes armor. It becomes the mindset that says, even this I can use. Even this I can learn from. It's the mindset that allows you to endure without becoming bitter, to lose without losing yourself, to struggle without surrendering your sense of worth. It's how you stay centered when the outcome hasn't arrived yet, because your value is no longer tied to arrival, but to alignment. And when you operate from gratitude, people feel it. You stop needing to prove. You stop broadcasting your effort. You stop comparing your timeline to someone else's. Gratitude eliminates the need for external validation. You become harder to manipulate, harder to discourage, harder to derail, because you're no longer chasing to become enough. You already are. The chase is now about expression, about stewardship, about becoming a fuller version of what you've already been gifted with. This is the secret most high performers eventually learn, sometimes the hard way. Gratitude is not a break from the work. It is what allows you to sustain the work without becoming consumed by it. It is the reset button for a mind that's drifted too far into scarcity. And it's what turns ordinary days into milestones. Ordinary effort into legacy. Because when you approach life with a heart trained to recognize what's right, even the hard moments feel purposeful. So stop waiting for some imaginary future where you'll finally have enough to be grateful. Gratitude is not a reaction, it's a choice. It's a practice. It's a filter through which you see your entire life. And when you apply that filter consistently, you stop running from moment to moment hoping for peace, you start living in it. Not because everything is perfect, but because your perspective is. Gratitude won't make you soft. It will make you steady. It will remind you, in the middle of the climb, that you're already standing on the mountain someone else is still trying to reach. And it will give you the clarity to keep going, not out of desperation, but out of devotion. Not because you're empty, but because you're full enough to share. That's real power. The kind that isn't shaken. The kind that builds. Quietly. Daily. Gratefully. Chapter 10. Adaptability, bending without breaking, moving without losing yourself. You will not get through this life on plans alone. You can have the most detailed strategy, the clearest goals, the strongest sense of direction, and life will still interrupt you. It will shake your sense of certainty. It will throw detours across your carefully designed path, bend your timeline, disrupt your rhythm, and dare you to respond. And when that happens, the question will not be, can I stick to the plan? The real question will be, can I stay in motion without losing myself? That's adaptability. And it is not optional. It is survival, strategic, intelligent, and ultimately empowering. Adaptability is the ability to shift gears without shifting your identity. It's the art of adjusting the method without abandoning the mission. Because the path will change. That's inevitable. But the purpose, if it's rooted deep enough, shouldn't. That's what keeps you grounded while the ground beneath you moves. Most people fail not because they're incapable, but because they're inflexible. They become so attached to how things were supposed to happen that they miss the opportunities in how things are actually unfolding. They write a script for life, cast themselves in the lead role, and when reality doesn't follow the script, they freeze, panic, or quit. But life has never followed a script. It unfolds through chaos, through mystery, through surprise. And the people who thrive are not those who resist change. They're the ones who know how to respond to it with calm, with clarity, and with control. Being adaptable doesn't mean you lack discipline or direction. It means you're mentally agile. It means you can take a hit, absorb the feedback, pivot when necessary, and continue moving forward with intention. It means you can evolve your strategy without compromising your standard. It's the difference between being fragile and being forged. Fragile minds break under pressure. Adaptable minds are forged through pressure. They use disruption as data. They turn setbacks into strategy. They welcome uncertainty, not because they enjoy discomfort, but because they've trained for it. And the most powerful thing about an adaptable mind is this: it never panics. It evaluates. It doesn't freeze when the plan stops working. It starts building a new one. This doesn't mean you give up on your vision. It means you stay loyal to the outcome, but flexible in the approach. The most successful entrepreneurs, athletes, creators, and thinkers all share this quality. They are masters of redirection. When the market changes, they change. When the rules shift, they shift. When the world says no, they find a new way in. Not because they have no fear, but because they've trained their nervous system to operate inside it. That is real mental control. The root of adaptability is not skill. It's mindset. It's the understanding that change is not the enemy, resistance to it is. The more you resist change, the more painful it becomes. But the moment you start moving with it instead of against it, you stop being its victim. You start becoming its student. You start asking better questions. What is this teaching me? What does this make possible now? What would the next level version of me do in this situation? These are not just mindset hacks. They are tools for survival in a world that refuses to stay still. Adaptability is also the antidote to perfectionism. Because perfectionism is really just fear disguised as high standards. It's the illusion that if you plan well enough, prepare long enough, obsess thoroughly enough, you can avoid all discomfort. But discomfort is inevitable. Plans will fail. Expectations will be unmet. Something will go wrong. And when it does, the perfectionist breaks down because their identity was attached to flawless execution. The adaptable person? They keep moving. They don't need perfection. They need progress. You have to become the kind of person who can evolve in real time. The kind who doesn't fall apart just because things didn't go according to plan. You have to be the person who doesn't wait for ideal conditions to act, who doesn't mourn change longer than necessary, who doesn't allow uncertainty to become paralysis. The person who, even when thrown off course, knows how to recalibrate and return to the mission with renewed clarity. And let's be clear, adaptability is not weakness. It's not passivity. It's not letting life toss you around. It's knowing the difference between what's in your control and what isn't, and focusing your full energy on what you can shape. That is strength. It's knowing that your power doesn't come from controlling the world. It comes from mastering your response to it. It comes from knowing how to lead yourself through chaos, how to rebuild from rubble, how to stay aligned even when the system around you breaks. That's how legacies are built. Not in perfect conditions, but in unstable ones. When the storm comes and most people run or freeze, the adaptable person adjusts. They stabilize from within. They double down on discipline, filter out distractions, restructure their priorities, and get to work. Not with panic, with precision. This level of mental control comes from experience, yes. But more importantly, it comes from decision. The decision to stop expecting life to be linear. The decision to stop tying your identity to a specific method. The decision to trust your ability to evolve, no matter how many times the script changes. Because it will. It has to. That's the nature of growth. And the more you cling to what used to work, the longer you delay what's now possible. Adaptability doesn't mean you change who you are. It means you become more of who you need to be. It means you don't let circumstance shrink you. You let it shape you. And then you keep going. Stronger, wiser, sharper, more prepared for the next disruption. Because there will always be another one. And now you'll be ready. Chapter 11. Resilience, the power to rise again and again and again. There's a part of you that doesn't break. You may not have seen it clearly yet. You may have forgotten it in moments of overwhelm or loss. You may have buried it beneath self-doubt or shame. But it's there. It doesn't scream. It doesn't rush. It doesn't need attention. It just waits for you to remember. That part is your resilience. And it's not something you're born with. It's something you build over time through choices that feel small in the moment but compound into indestructibility. Resilience isn't about never falling. It's about refusing to stay down. It's about the decision to keep going not because the pain is gone, but because the purpose is louder. In a world that celebrates speed, applause, and visibility, resilience is what you develop in silence, when no one is watching, when the outcome is uncertain, and when you have every excuse to walk away but choose not to. Resilience is forged in moments of friction. In the heartbreak you didn't think you could recover from. In the failure that knocked the wind out of you. In the job you lost, the opportunity that fell apart, the season of confusion where nothing made sense. It's built in those long nights when you feel forgotten, unseen, and tired of carrying so much on your back, but you get up anyway, not because anyone's pushing you, but because something in you refuses to die quietly. And here's what most people never understand. Resilience is not a trait for the lucky or the strong. It is a necessity for the human experience. Because suffering is not optional. Loss is not avoidable. Life doesn't ask if you're ready before it breaks something in you. The question is not if life will test you. The question is who will you become because of it? You can let it harden you. You can let it make you bitter, small, cold, cynical. That's the path of least resistance. Or you can let it shape you into someone whose scars don't signal weakness, but wisdom. Someone who doesn't pretend the pain didn't happen, but chooses to build from it anyway. Someone who rewires pain into power. The difference between those two paths? That's what resilience really is, 1,000 invisible choices. The choice to see the lesson instead of the loss. The choice to stay open when shutting down would be easier. The choice to walk forward with heavy legs, to speak truth with a trembling voice, to rebuild with bleeding hands. It's not about strength in the conventional sense. It's about endurance, inner elasticity, a mindset that knows how to absorb impact and still move forward without becoming defined by the blow. Resilience teaches you how to recover without resentment, to fall without drama, to lose without erasing your identity. It teaches you that emotions are real, but they don't have to be permanent. That discomfort is data. That adversity isn't a detour, it's part of the path. And when you start to see life that way, you stop looking for a version of success without suffering. You stop asking why it's hard and start asking what it's building in you. Viktor Frankl wrote from inside a concentration camp that man's last and greatest freedom is the ability to choose his response to any set of circumstances. That's not a motivational quote. That's a survival philosophy. That's what resilience looks like when it's tested to the edge of human experience, and still chooses meaning, still chooses identity, still chooses response over reaction. So when you hit that wall, mentally, emotionally, physically, don't make it your home. Make it your checkpoint. Breathe. Regroup. Remember that what you're feeling is part of the climb, not the end of it. The move. Even if it's slow. Even if it's messy. Even if every part of you wants to stop. Because each time you continue, each time you rise, you reinforce something powerful inside yourself. I don't quit on who I'm becoming. And that identity, the one who rises again and again, is far more valuable than any goal you'll ever reach. Because once that version of you is built, nothing can be taken from you. You've become the kind of person who doesn't just survive storms. You use them. You don't just recover. You rebuild better. You don't fear failure. You know it's just the first draft of something great. Resilience also teaches you patience. Not the kind that sits around waiting, but the kind that understands the long game. It gives you the ability to play beyond the moment. To see your life as a process of becoming, not just a series of wins and losses. When others quit because they're not getting results fast enough, you keep showing up, not because you're naive, but because you know that mastery takes time. That becoming unshakable is not an event. It's a pattern. And when your mind is trained in resilience, you stop being scared of change. You stop needing everything to be stable before you take action. You learn that instability is just another condition to train in. That chaos is a classroom. That discomfort is a forge. You become the kind of person who doesn't need things to go your way in order to keep going. And yes, there will be moments where the weight feels unbearable. Where resilience doesn't feel like fire, it feels like fatigue. Where the brave thing is not the next big move, but the quiet decision to not give up today. And that's okay. Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is stay. Stay in the fight. Stay with the process. Stay loyal to the version of you that's still forming in the dark. Resilience isn't flashy. It doesn't announce itself. But it leaves a mark. It builds a presence. And people feel it. In your eyes. In your energy. In the way you carry your story, not as a wound, but as a testament. The proof. That you were hit. That you bled. That you bent. But that you never broke. So when the next wave comes, and it will, don't fear it. Don't avoid it. Step into it with a calm knowing. I've been here before. I know how to rise. Because resilience isn't something you tap into once. It's something you become. And once you do, the world can throw whatever it wants at you. You'll bend. You'll sway. But you will not break. Because you've decided. This story does not end here. Chapter 12. Mastery. Becoming the architect of your inner world. There's a point where effort alone is no longer enough. Where hard work, discipline, and resilience bring you to the threshold, but not through the door. You've come too far to go back, but forward requires something else. Something deeper. Something quieter. Something fewer people talk about. This is where the pursuit stops being about speed or intensity. This is where the work becomes refinement. And that's what mastery is. The gradual, deliberate transformation of who you are at the deepest level. Not performance. Not outcome. Ownership. Mastery is not about what you can do when everything is going well. It's about what you become when no one is watching, when no one is validating you, when the results haven't arrived yet, and all that's left is the process. The daily repetition. The unseen hours. The radical responsibility for how you think, how you speak to yourself, how you spend your energy, how you organize your mind. Mastery begins the moment you realize that excellence isn't a peak you reach. It's a standard you hold, regardless of recognition. To become the architect of your inner world is to stop reacting and start designing. To stop depending on the external world to determine your internal state. To stop outsourcing your identity to outcomes, applause, or circumstances. Mastery means you no longer live in emotional chaos because of what others say or do. You no longer require perfect conditions to execute. You no longer wait for motivation to move. You move because it's who you are. And that's the critical shift. It's not about doing anymore. It's about being. It's about embodying the mindset, values, and principles you once had to remind yourself of. Now they live in your bones. Mastery isn't the absence of struggle. It's your ability to navigate it with precision. To move through pain without panic. To lead yourself with unshakable clarity. To stay centered in the middle of complexity because you've trained your nervous system to operate under pressure, not collapse from it. Most people never get here. They're stuck in cycles of reactivity, rushing to fix, overcompensate, impress, or recover. They start strong and crash hard. They confuse intensity with consistency. But mastery is what happens when you evolve past the need for hype. When you stop chasing results like a drug and start mastering the systems that create them. When you finally understand that the real game isn't external. It's internal control over your own attention, energy, and focus. You master your mind the same way you master anything else. Repetition, intention, and constant refinement. Not just knowing your triggers, but rewiring your response. Not just managing stress, but learning how to alchemize it into clarity. Not just overcoming distraction, but building a life where distraction no longer finds fertile ground. This is where you stop asking the world to be easier and instead make yourself stronger, sharper, quieter, clearer. And clarity is a hallmark of mastery. The more you evolve, the less noise you tolerate, internally and externally. You stop entertaining mental clutter. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop negotiating with your old identity. Mastery is clean. Not because life is perfect, but because you are precise. You make fewer decisions, but they matter more. You don't chase every opportunity, you evaluate, filter, act. You don't perform, you build. The irony of mastery is that the more you know, the less you need to prove. The more skill you have, the more humility you hold. You realize you're never finished. You are never above the fundamentals. You never graduate from your own self-awareness. And that keeps you evolving not because you're insecure, but because you're alive to your potential. You start to understand that mastery is not a peak. It's a horizon that keeps expanding the more you walk toward it. And the further you go, the less it becomes about proving anything to anyone. You stop needing validation, comparison, applause. Because you've built an inner world so aligned, so anchored, so coherent, that external approval feels like a bonus, not a necessity. You don't need permission anymore. You are the authority. This is when you become dangerous, in the best way. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're immovable. Because you no longer flinch in discomfort. You no longer argue with chaos. You absorb it, translate it, and respond with precision. Your presence becomes unmistakable. You become a source of calm in other people's storms. A mirror that reflects what others forgot was possible. And not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. People feel it. The stillness. The strength. The discipline that's no longer forced but embodied. They don't just hear your words, they watch your habits. They feel your alignment. They witness the consistency that doesn't waver when no one's keeping score. That's the quiet, unmistakable signal of mastery. But none of it happens by accident. Mastery is built in the dark, in the silence, when you choose to do the work that no one applauds. When you train your mind not just to survive, but to operate at the highest level under the most ordinary conditions. It's not about being the best in the world. It's about being the best for the world. For your family. For your team. For the mission. For the person you were 5 years ago who dreamed of becoming this version of you. You owe it to them to keep going. You owe it to yourself to become undeniable. You owe it to your potential to not settle at the halfway mark. So where do you go from here? You keep refining. You keep designing. You keep mastering. One breath at a time. One moment of stillness. One decision made in alignment. 1 hour of deep work. One boundary honored. One old habit broken. One new standard set. Not all at once, but deliberately. Without drama. Without compromise. That's how you earn the right to say, I control my mind. Not because I suppress it. Because I lead it. Because I've trained it. Because I've earned it. This is not the end. This is not arrival. This is the moment you realize. The world doesn't get to tell you who you are anymore. Because you decided. And that decision? That's where mastery begins. And it never ends.